Gaming. I'm one of your hosts, Jefferson J. Thacker, also known as Param, and I'm joined by.
Kirsten Sowers, also known as Seventh Mastery, and
And
today we have
today,
an
go
awesome
for
guest.
it.
Hey guys, I'm Taylor from Creature Caster.
Yay, Taylor! Thank you for joining us. Honestly,
Not a
man, I'm
problem.
super hyped to have you on here because Creature Caster's reputation is like precedes 3D printing and awesomeness, and you all like it's whenever I watch as any miniature nerd does, like I watch all the painting videos, listen to all the podcasts, and it's like always like this reverent tone when people talk about the quality of a Creature Caster sculpt and like how awesome they are to paint. And so like the fact that you all got involved in 3D printing in the first place had me super hyped, and the fact that we get to chat with you here is just like made my whole week. So thank you for joining us.
Well, I'm happy to be here, guys.
Yep. Awesome. So we are just going to jump right into it. So for anybody who doesn't know, and my horrible fawning introduction didn't take care of, what's the elevator pitch version of Creature Caster?
We're a boutique miniature manufacturer out of, they're out of British Columbia, Canada.
Mm-hmm.
I'm about 3,500 kilometers east of them, and we produce fine hand-poured miniatures for gamers and hobbyists throughout the world.
And they are gorgeous.
Thank you.
Now, what's that phrase? You said hand poured?
Yeah, so our resin is we don't do plastic injection. All of our resin is pure hand poured resin. So Simon, he's the you guys met him at Gen Con. He's the wizard behind producing these amazing models in resin. He actually him and his team mix the resin and pour it in the molds, and then pull the molds and sell it that way. So we don't do any plastic injection. We're strictly old school, pouring the resin, pulling it out, putting it to and getting it sold.
Do y'all use those like vacuum machines and pressure chambers and stuff?
I'll be completely honest with you. I have no idea how they do it. I've never been to the facility. I'm 3,500 kilometers away from it. And every
Fair
time,
enough.
okay. I keep on saying when I do go down there, I'm actually going to engage in some hard work and pull some molds and help Simon do some casting. But every time it comes time for me to travel, it's usually to an event to sell product. I haven't had a chance to actually go to the facility in the past 2 years.
I always love asking people how like the stuff is made, and like which I've really appreciated. Like so many companies are getting like factory tours and stuff happening now. I remember it probably about 12 or so years ago. We were talking with somebody from Reaper Miniatures, so like old school like metal miniatures, and he was a spin caster, and I had to ask him, what's a spin caster mean? He's a big old buff dude who puts these molds at the either end of a steel rod and spins them.
That's how they did it for metal. Yeah, that's
oh my gosh,
that's old school. That's
so
yeah.
Do you have like do you have like your big old buff dude that's just like spinning the resin molds?
No. I don't believe our resin is actually spin cast. It's it's poured and then vibrated, and then what happens is that gets all the bubbles out, and I believe it's heated slightly, and then and then when it cools and obviously dries, hardens because it's a 2-part resin. It's an epoxy resin, right? Then it just gets pulled from the silicone molds.
Yeah. How long has Creature Caster been making these horrific monstrosities of my nightmares?
I believe we're celebrating our 9th anniversary, I think, at this point. But we started off. It was actually different management when it first started, and since then the business has transferred to new management, right? And that's So we've been. I think the management that we have now has been owners of the company for 7 years.
Okay.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So the majority of the history of the company.
Yeah, like I think when I started it was 5, so I think I've been there for 2 years now, so that's 7.
And what is your role at Creature Caster?
I'm the business development officer, which loosely translates to doing anything the CEO doesn't want to do.
Ah.
That sounds familiar.
Yeah, familiar with that role.
I mean, my main role is to make sure that Creature Caster is profitable and producing making sure that we're exploring opportunities to make sure that we're able to produce product. We're also, so we're talking like different companies and working with different companies and that sort of thing. I also, part of my role is to sell the product to customers, and also to retail stores, different venues, that sort of thing. In addition to that, when I started, my first order of business was moving CreatureCaster into the digital realm and producing 3D printed models, because that was something we hadn't been doing. And I knew that it was definitely vital that we got into that market. And yeah, that was kind of where it started. And then from there, our 3D printing market has grown exponentially since we first started it back in March. It's also turned into, I also ended up doing all the lore writing for the company, Dungeons and Dragons, doing all that sort of stuff. I'm also work directly with Cephalopod Studios to bring in to bring our paints to market and to sell our paints to customers and retailers, and work directly with him. And I also am involved with our flagship tabletop game, Judgment Eternal Champions, where I will be doing writing for that, as well as selling it to retailers and promoting that to different venues.
David says, so the CEO did not want to come talk.
Absolutely not. He is not someone who, that's why he hired me, David. He hired me to do these conversations at 8:30 at night.
And this has got and you've got a like an interesting set of explorations, because like CreatureCaster, it sounds like it's definitely on the boutique side of the studios. Like you focus on a core group of high quality, really artistic miniatures at a time, right?
Yeah, we're not a big team, so we have to pick and choose what we want to produce. We can't just produce. We don't have a lot of sculptors, right? So, and we do employ our sculptors full time. We're, they are CreatureCaster sculptors through and through, and we have one concept artist who does all of our concept art for these artists, under the direction of our CEO, who's also our art director.
Nice.
Yeah.
So that's the one I'm familiar with.
Yeah. So yeah. Oh boy. Yeah. But so yeah, he's so we basically produce models that are very niche, but we know usually all of our models are hits. We sell we tend to sell of our initial run very quickly, and then what happens is we have to put them sort of into a schedule where we produce more models later on. They're produced in batches, right? So once we do a run, I think it includes about 120 models. We let that run out, and then we do another run of, and while that is going, we start producing runs of other models, and hopefully by the time we get back in that model, all the model we have will be sold.
We do appear to be losing your audio there a little bit.
That's possible. It's like I said, this mic is not the greatest. I would. Seems pretty quiet.
Yeah, it's like it's having like weird in and out.
If you could lift the arm a little bit, it looks like it's doing better when it's closer to your mouth a little bit.
How about that? Is that better?
That's
much better. Yeah.
Okay. And sorry, audience, for that.
That's okay.
Now we've got some of your models up on screen for those of you watching it. It is these. I don't even know how to describe these hounds of sinew and nope.
Yeah. These are this is an unreleased model at this point. I'm going to be revealing this tomorrow. That's okay. I actually told people in our My Mini Factory thing that if they tune in tonight, they'll be able to see the sneak preview of next month's releases.
I am so sorry. I just was pulling this
No. I posted these on purpose. No, I did it on purpose. Okay. Yeah, so these are going to be released in September. They're part of our World of Reclamation series of models, which is our Dungeons and Dragons campaign setting. And these are the Sarabi of Ecstasy, and they are demonic hounds that the people of Shebnaz use to hunt down those who try to flee them.
Yeah, these look like horrible. Like, am I right that that's like sinew and muscle that I'm seeing here?
Yeah. So what they have on the back. Oh, you guys can't see my mouse, so why am I moving it? Yeah, on the backs, there's two different varieties. We got so what they have from a from an encounter point of view is they
Mhm.
have a hallucinogenic musk that they give off.
Oh,
Right.
lovely.
Ooh, so it's like
So-
mist.
Yeah, so when people get close to them, they start feeling really good, and they don't want to fight. They, sort of like a what's that Crown of Madness spell? I think is kind of
Mhm.
what it does.
Sure.
And then and if they don't have that, and if they don't have that active, they have a lashing tongue, because that's actually a mouth that opens up on their back, and that tongue has a needle on it that stings them and poisons them.
Oh, lovely.
Yeah.
You know, I'm a fan of the oddly placed anatomical mouth. So
Right.
I will probably show off Sweet Tooth later, but
Yeah.
the armpit shoulder mouth thing is
It was pretty good.
amazing.
Yeah.
And I think that, like, sort of like, if we were to talk about the style of your typical creature caster model, it's worth pointing out that there is no fewer than 7 tentacles in your logo.
we call that the Octo Skull, actually.
So here's a question on your coming up in gaming. How did that happen, and what drew you to this like meeting of fate? Like, were you always a tentacle team player, or was that something you just lucked into?
I'm a horror junkie. I've always been a horror junkie since I was a little kid.
Okay.
I grew up on horror movies, and it was one of those things where I've always been into writing horror, reading horror, watching horror movies, playing horror video games, and yeah. So personally, I got into gaming when I was really young. I think
How
I
young?
started. I want to say 7 or 8. I was doing like I had neighbors and they were getting into Dungeons and Dragons and like the basic set. I'm old. I'm 43, so
I'm right there with you. So
yeah. So you know what I'm talking about. So it was back in the 80s when the Satanic Panic and all that stuff too.
Oh,
Now
yeah.
it wasn't as bad in Canada as it was in the States. Like, so just
Lucky
to be
you.
clear, right? I had one crazy aunt. I'm sure you had a dozen, right?
I had a crazy mom about it. So
Oh, there you
yeah,
go.
It
So-
was the best.
Nicholas
Nick.
Hadley, 43
Nick.
is not old.
Oh, Nick, I'm building a cobblestone street. Trust me, it is old. But
Yeah.
anyway, so I that's how I got involved with start getting into Dungeons and Dragons and that sort of thing. And then I'm really sorry about that if you heard that. I don't think you did.
It was a mild notification.
Okay,
So it was fine.
sorry. That's my
You're
work work thing. But anyway, so after that, I was always into like monsters and creating our own role playing games. Because Dungeons and Dragons was still pretty complicated for an 8-year-old, so we were just doing our own like flip a coin type stuff, right? Then I got into the not Choose Your Own Adventure, what are they called? The Fighting Fantasy books by Steve Jackson. Steve
Okay.
Jackson Games. So yeah, I got into those. And then my dad, turns out my dad was a huge closet nerd. You wouldn't know it meeting him, but anyway, he ended up doing he ended up going to the comic book store and getting some metal models for me to paint with some
Ooh.
testers enamels, right? And that's
Ah.
kind of where it really started.
Mhm.
I remember he got me the Dragonlance core set, and he got me there was a silver dragon from Dragonlance. It
Mhm.
was like an old lead silver dragon,
Oh yeah.
because it wasn't pewter back then. Oh no, sir, it was lead.
No, it was lead. lead first for sure. Yeah.
My
I had
brother
some
will
of those.
attest to it because he chewed on them a lot.
Oh no.
Oh, no.
But
Yikes.
anyway, yeah. Anyway, yeah, we were kids and we still, I mean, you get lead all over your hands. Like oh dude, I can't believe we were even doing that. But anyway, we played with lead. And then there was a game that came out, and I believe it was a joint Mattel and Games Workshop game, called Battle Masters or something along those
Mhm.
lines. It had the
Yep.
big hex map,
Right.
and it came with like so many plastic models and like big trays, right? And it came with like a what's it called? Like a keep, like a stone
Mhm.
keep. And then what you did with the stone on that stone keep was, you had that and you were fighting over the keep, and you had dice and rules, and it was very simplified Warhammer.
Mhm.
And that really got us into Warhammer Fantasy. And that's kind of where it started. Then I think when I was 13, my parents got me the Warhammer 40K box set, second
Ooh.
edition. I still have the books for that actually. And that got my brother and I into it more. And
What was your first army?
my first army, for fantasy, it was Orcs and Goblins.
Okay.
Mhm.
But quickly transitioned to Chaos, obviously. It did not take me long. I mean, the thing is, the Orcs and Goblins, they had those cool femur models, right? And I was
Sure.
a big fan of the femur back then.
Mhm.
Just because Hero Quest, and they had the big Cyclops eye with the big
Oh
shark
yeah,
tail,
yeah.
and they were pretty rad. But
But
anyway,
they're not demon rad.
they're half demons.
Oh, fair
So
enough.
yeah, and that's kind of what led me to the Chaos route. And then, but now back then, Chaos didn't have Chaos gods; they just had Chaos, right? With like
Sure.
lesser demons and demon princes and that sort of thing. And eventually, they got the Chaos. I think it was the Realm of Chaos book that came out after that and got us to that. But I mean, 40K actually wasn't a big focus of mine as a kid. I was really into Warhammer Fantasy. It was just like 40K was okay, but what was that other game we used to play? It was a science fiction game that was around the same time as 40K, and it had the dude with the big chin, and like they're I can't remember what it was. They just did a Kickstarter, it just got redone.
Sorry, so
No,
sorry.
I'm gonna
Can't
kick
remember.
myself later for not remembering
We
it.
played that a little
The
bit. We
audience is
dabble in that.
screaming at us.
Yeah, I'm sure, but we'll figure it out.
Maybe chat will save us. Chat.
Yeah, maybe.
What was a big chinned sci-fi game that was recently rebooted on Kickstarter? Go.
Was it Warzone? Was it called Warzone? Does that sound familiar?
I do remember a game called
Oh,
Warzone.
I have to look that up. Warzone. I bet you it is Warzone.
Yeah.
It was the Mutant Chronicles
Okay.
game.
Oh, okay, Mutant Chronicles for sure. Definitely.
Yeah,
familiar with that.
I think Mutant Chronicles. Yeah, it is Warzone.
Yeah.
Wow, look at that memory. Wow, Warzone. All right. Anyway,
the
so
power of the nerd brain on
God.
display.
so many things I probably could have put in there, but instead I have Warzone stuck in my head. But anyway, but yeah, so mainly Warhammer Fantasy, and then growing up with role-playing games, we were Dragon Quest and Rollmaster guys, so we played that largely.
All the crit tables forever and ever.
Oh yeah, but that was we had that conversation the other day where exactly how I feel about that. But so essentially, I mean, I went to school. I got into business. I was doing business development for mining companies and industry, like heavy industry companies, for the longest time. And then on the side, of course, I was doing commission painting and indulging in my geek hobbies. Then ended up becoming the North American marketing editor for Corvus Belli on the side, doing a lot of editing for that. So anything that was English that was seen from Corvus Belli for Infinity was touched by my hands and rewritten. I became pretty fluent in Spanglish, which is important. I don't speak Spanish, but anything that was sent to me that was first translated by Spanish translators I ended up rewriting everything. And then from there, Angel Giraldez needed some help with his studio when he left Corvus. So I was helping him.
Amazing painter.
Yeah. He's fantastic. Great guy. And then he hooked me up with Yadharo Models, which is a fantastic miniature company. I'm very close with Pedro and Fausto.
Several of their Kickstarters, I believe. So.
Oh, they're phenomenal. Their models, what they're doing with CO Res is just crazy. Their work is impeccable. And of course, Fausto, he's one of the sculptors for Corvus Belli, right? So, and from there, I ended up working for a few other game companies, because once you start getting a name out there in the game industry, more people want to work with you. And
it's true.
In my professional life, I was working for the Chamber of Commerce for a bit. Then I went and I was working for doing business development for a security company. And I was sick and tired of the day-to-day corporate job. And I was talking to my friend Peter, who's the CEO of Creaturecaster, and he asked me if I would be interested in coming to work for him. And and it was the day where I was like, you know what? Yeah, sure. And my wife gave me the thumbs up, which was very important.
Of course.
Well, when you're moving to the game industry is not nearly as as liquid as the security company as the industries that I was working in. So
yes, mining and security, I'm sure, had a little bit bigger budget lines for you.
Just a little bit. Yeah. But so I made I made the choice for my mental health to go into this, and now I essentially what I tell people when they ask me what I do, because they have no idea, I say I write D&D adventures for a living.
Oh,
Yeah,
very nice.
that's I mean, that's not all I do, but it's
Mhm.
what I like to say I do, because it makes people confused and gives a lot of people hope that eventually they could do the same thing, right?
Sure.
Yeah.
Don't
Speaking
have to
of,
wear 12 other hats to do it.
Oh yeah, you have to. There's a reason why I can do that, is because I have to be profitable in other areas.
speaking of the D&D adventures and D&D stat and the custom world, how important is that to what you all do at Creature Caster?
I think it's becoming more and more important. So, I and I mean, we're like Creature Caster has been catering to largely to a Games Workshop audience for the
Mhm.
past, since its inception.
Mhm.
People have been using our models as proxies, which is great. And of course, but we're a niche within a niche, right?
Mhm.
We're producing demons, which is a niche army in 40K, right? If we were producing Space Marines, we might be having a different conversation. But all we produce are used for a niche faction, and we had to expand our range. And as you and I discussed earlier, Chris, um, you know, for every person that plays a tabletop war game, there's 10 people that are playing role playing games, right,
Mhm.
in their homes. Um, so when this whole idea was pitched, not only was it great that we were getting into the Dungeons and Dragons market, and the reason we went with Dungeons and Dragons is because it's simply the most popular tabletop game.
Yeah, it's good
Um,
business.
yeah, but it's also a great way for us to write down, like, develop our IP, because everyone at the company has different ideas of what we want to do and what, like, part of the stories that we want to tell in this universe, right?
Right.
And by putting into a role playing game, it allows us to tell those stories in a very digestible format,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
Because we're not a big company. We don't have the Black Library, right? We have a game, but the game is like Judgment Trail Champions doesn't even take place really in the same universe as the other stuff that we're producing. So the best way we thought to do it was to produce the World of Reclamation, which is our campaign setting.
Well, it's good because the audience is already like prepped to take modular content, right? So
Yeah,
they're used to seeing an expansion. They're used to just getting a single box set of minis, and it allows you to move into that space very gradually. Although it sounds like it's been blowing up for you quite a bit.
yeah. Like, we started off with it was supposed to be just one-shot adventures, but as I was writing and as the story progressed, it started becoming really apparent that our audience wanted connecting adventures and to keep the adventures going. So it's now turned into more of a campaign setting than an actual just series of one-shot adventures, which, I mean, is okay. We always wanted to put out the campaign setting anyway.
Right.
So
Right.
this way, at least what we're able to do is, you know, build up an entire series of adventures. So an entire run of adventures is going to be 12 adventures.
Mhm.
And by the end of that, hopefully what we can do is put together a whole campaign setting book based on that part of the world's reclamation, kind of like how Dungeons and Dragons did it with, like, Ravenloft, or
Mhm.
like those kind of things. It's a whole area. Like, there's a series of adventures in there, but it's also like you get to explore the area, you get to explore the lore.
Have
And
you seen what Privateer Press is doing with the Hordes world for 5e?
no, I haven't actually.
They've done a very similar thing where there's a regional campaign book that has some new crunchy stuff and like a lot
Okay.
of history, and then there's a companion module, and they've been doing Kickstarters with it, and they've been doing really, really well.
Well, I think I actually have the Iron Kingdoms D&D
Yeah.
supplement for 3.0.
Yeah, they
Which,
upgraded that to
oh,
5e,
okay.
and
Yeah.
then they have done a sequence of like serial setup, like follow sequels to it.
Now, was it a role playing game before it was a tabletop game? I
It
think it was.
was.
Was it? It was. Yeah, that's what I
Yeah,
thought.
Iron Kingdoms was a third party D&D 3.5
Yeah, that's the one I
book.
have. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah, that's what I had. Yeah, and then I think it was probably, I want to say, 10 years later I found out about War Machine the game.
Mhm.
Mhm.
And so that's that's how I got into War Machine.
And like RPGs and wargaming have had like a really close relationship since like
Yes. Yeah.
literally the very beginning, because
Yeah.
D&D evolved from a war game called Chainmail.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And I mean,
Mhm.
even Games Workshop, I have the first edition actually of the Warhammer Fantasy role playing game,
Mhm.
right? Which was kind of like Rolemaster. I don't think we got into it too much. We tried,
Mhm.
I think, when we were teenagers, but it was
Mhm.
a little too crunchy.
Yeah.
Coming from despite playing Rolemaster, it was definitely
Mhm.
I think it was it was a little weird.
It's a very different experience for our if anybody hasn't played some of those early Warhammer games, like your starting class isn't fighter or warlock, it might be rat catcher.
Mhm.
And and character death was a very common thing, right?
Mhm.
I think I saw a meme recently where it had modern day role players, right? And it's like, no, my character, whatever, this isn't fair, right? I need to roll 6 dice and I'll be fine, right? And then it had this other guy from Warhammer Fantasy role playing, and he says, well, you miscast the spell, so you're ripped apart by demons. You have to make a new
Right.
character. And the guy goes, understood.
I remember that just
Yeah.
feeling like because I came even when I played first ed D&D, I was a mage, and
Yeah.
I did a cleric initially, but spellcasters. And so when I went to play fantasy at role playing for Warhammer for a bit, I was like, what? I can kill myself with my
Oh
own
yeah,
spells?
you can.
What?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I think it was Dragon Quest had a critical if you failed the spell by 30%. I can't believe I remember these rules. It's been like
I can't.
20 years. But in Traveler you could die in character creation.
Yeah, very
Hilariously.
famously in Traveler, you can die.
Hilariously. Um, but if you failed if you failed the roll, you had to roll on a miscast table, and it was horrible. Like
Mhm.
horrible things, like your character would lose their voice, and you couldn't talk as the character. And it had like specifically says you can't talk in character anymore, like all these things. And I'm like, oh no, I'm not
Yeah,
playing a wizard.
mhm. I played Saturday night and I had a wild mage in my 5e game, and he got a result because I was using variant tables, not the official ones.
Yeah.
And he got a result where he created an anti-magic zone around himself, so none of the spellcasters in the party could function. And like their bowels turned to water. They were freaking out just because they'd never had that sort of experience. And I was just like, this feels very familiar from like a long time ago.
Those early Gygaxian days, like they don't make them like that no more, and I
No,
don't know
no.
that they should make them like that no
Uh,
more. But it's a experience worth having.
So our creature caster adventures actually are very lethal.
Mhm.
They're skewed high, like skewed high for challenge ratings. And on top of that too, I use the exhaustion rules a lot. And not apparently these new exhaustion rules that came out that I wasn't aware of.
The
Um,
playtest ones, yeah.
yeah, the exhaustion rules are very punishing. And
Yes. Piles and piles of conditions on top of conditions.
well, the idea, right, is to make things difficult for the characters and to make them have to choose whether they want to run or whether they want to stay and fight, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
So, one like having one encounter in an adventure that's actually meaningful and scary, I find is a lot better than having repeated encounters that are you're just rolling through, right?
Well, and apparently they're gonna get misted and have like waves of ecstasy and be hanging out while the dogs chew them to death with their back maws.
I think the conversation was, you could be a Sarabi could be eating your guts, and you'd be whistling and singing along with them.
Oh my
Ew.
goodness.
I mean, I like it, but yikes.
Yeah.
And I guess that's another reason that I was kind of asking that is like you have these really imaginative, really visually striking and nightmarish creations that the quality of the sculpts and how much fun these are to paint is one thing. But I'm not going to look up in my monster manual and see the Sarabis of ecstasy. They're not going to be in there. So like when
That's why Taylor's writing them into
so
his little
is that another reason that you do provide these like stats and adventures to use
Yes.
these things in so that because like I've said before with Kristen, like sometimes there'll be a miniature so awesome that I will come up with a reason to use it, even if I don't have one on hand. And yours, a lot of yours would fall into that category.
Well, I'll let you in on a secret. I have
Mhm.
D&D stats for every one of the creatures in our collection.
Awesome.
Any creature caster creature that you have, I do have the D&D stats for it that will be released sometime in the future.
like even the old resin ones.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yep.
wow.
Everything.
But we can't get those in STLs though.
Well, not all of them, but Never
Oh.
say never. There
Mhm.
may be a time where we decide to retire some models and put them into STL format.
That's exciting. I mean, not exciting that you're going to retire them, but exciting to me because I would
Well,
print them.
the thing is, we have a huge catalog of models,
Mhm.
right?
You do.
And you know and keeping up with all of these models is, as you know, explaining the process of how you do this, like how we make the models, is very time consuming. So it's a big, it's one of those things where it's a reality, right? Where eventually you may have to retire models that are hard to create and just produce them in STL. Oh, there we go. Look at that. All tears here.
Does he have
doesn't look
like imps holding his cloak as he rushes into battle? That's amazing.
Yeah, that's actually Pusil. He's part of the Coterie of Despair, which is a group of knights that look to sow darkness throughout the lands of Reclamation.
It sounds so cheerful.
Yeah, he's actually the first one of them that were released. There's actually 5 of them that are going to be released at some point.
So is this one of the resin ones or a 3D printable?
This is 3D printable.
Okay.
All the images I sent you are
Mhm.
3D print models.
Wonderful. As we've talked with a few artists that talk about 3D printable models that would be extremely difficult or impossible to cast in other materials. Do you all have any of those situations, or
You
are
have one
you
up
like,
on the screen right now.
huh?
You have one up on the screen
Kind
right
of what I
now.
thought. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah, like could you ever cast this? Is what I'm asking.
So I'm learning a lot.
Uh-huh.
And a big part of this would be the cuts that would be very difficult, and it would
Mhm.
be very fragile. Whereas 3D printed, it's not. I know this model looks like it's fragile, and I thought I had it and I could have shown you, but I threw it out. It was a
Mhm.
test print of this model,
Mhm.
and because I had to test how strong the cape was with the imps holding it up, and it was
Right.
actually surprisingly durable.
Mhm.
But if you did that in resin, you'd have so many. So part of the problem with resin is you have to get the resin to all the pointy bits,
Mhm.
right? And the more pointy bits you have, the harder it is to get the resin to the very end of those tips, right?
Mhm.
If you look at a model with how many pointy bits are on here,
It's all pointy bits.
it's all pointy bits. So this would be very hard to produce in a resin format. Now,
in a
Simon,
board, yeah.
who has forgotten more about casting than most people ever know, has developed a way of doing things like this through using shims. So what he does is he shims and the reason he shim is to absorb the mold shift. So because when things get from liquid state to a hardened state, the molds will shift a little bit, right? The shims, what they'll do is they'll absorb the shift and allow us to create sharper angles, right? Because that's really what spiky points are angles, right? And that's what caused all the issue with resin casting. So could Simon produce this in resin? Maybe, but I know he wouldn't want to. So actually, I think you were also showing our children or not children. They're the silenced, which are unfortunate souls that have been consumed by Geist of Discord. Those guys would be also very difficult to produce in resin.
Like you do love your pointy bits and your
We
very
have a lot
shallow
of them.
angles, and like things pointing down and up and out and backwards and in every direction, which kind of defies the 2D plane you have to model around.
Well,
I
yeah.
yeah, I mean, like I'm imagining like some of the GW models that you have to put together where like the left shin also happens to have the chin on it for some reason, and then like you wrap around the stomach.
Well, they can do different things though because they're using injection molding, right?
Right.
So all of their plastic is injected high speed into their molds, right? So what happens is you're able to push everything down to the points, right? Where with resin you can't do that.
So now that you all have made that shift, because you all have been like, well-beloved physical modelists,
Yep.
and resin casting and shifting to digital, like what is your experience like between the two environments? Like what are the pros and cons of these different manufacturing methods.
I mean, with resin, like producing models in the physical, or it's the biggest advantage of that is anyone can buy them, right? It's an everyone there's no barriers to purchasing outside of money, right? So we can get our physical models out to a wider audience. The disadvantage of that is the overhead and the price point, right, of those models. Because I'll be the first to say, I mean, our models are not the cheapest models on the market by any stretch. Like our newest are dragons, which, I mean, again, these dragons are huge. I want to stress,
fantastic.
Like the warrior dragon is absurdly large. I mean, it's the I know you guys have no reference of how big I am, but what was it? So the base itself, I think it's 160 millimeter.
Yeah.
Right. So holding out a ruler. That's
It's like almost 8 inches.
Yeah, for yeah, of course that my ruler's backwards. But yeah, there we go. Do this. 160. Yeah, it's about a 6.5 inch base.
He's huge.
Out there. Yeah, so
massive.
Yeah,
it's a big old beastie.
And he's much bigger than his base.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So
I saw it at Gen Con, I think. And
yeah,
it was really impressive.
Yeah. So I mean, and these models, like, and on the flip side, right? You wouldn't want to print this model. Like I know you guys are avid 3D printers.
Oh yeah.
I have the STL file for this model, right? And I wouldn't dare.
I agree with you. Like I actually like you know, I in addition to y'all, I follow Loot, and those big models are fantastic, but like it is a commitment to print that, especially if you want to do it in resin.
Oh yeah.
Well, here I think the biggest way to sum that up is I do a lot of test printing for the company. And I remember I printed off a Smengel, the Plague Angel, right? Which is, so I did that, and I had to do the Spider Demon, right? Because I had to do a size comparison between the two of them.
Sure.
And I believe it was the Spider Demon was a 28-hour print.
Wow.
And I mean, this was just a test print. This wasn't actually like a super detailed print. So I was printing it at 0.05, not 0.03 like I usually do. And it was 28 hours to print that, and it failed twice.
Oof.
Right. So the amount of resin that I wasted, and the amount of resin I wasted doing that, right, and the amount of time it took me to do that, it was far better for me to spend the $100 buying the model, right? By the time it's said and done, and that's kind of the advantage of having physical models available for people, right? Is you know, you don't have the failure, you don't have the frustrations, right?
Well, you also have control of the quality too. Like, you know, it's going to look beautiful. Like I sometimes see community prints, and you know, people do their best, but if you don't have your settings dialed in, it's just not going to look nearly as good as what you're delivering on this print.
Well, and there's so many variables. I mean, 3D printing is a frustrating hobby, right? It's not. I know lots of people that have just, you know, they can't take it. I know a lot of people that buy a 3D printer thinking I'm going to paint a Warhammer, or I'm going to print off a Warhammer army for, you know, for $100. And the truth of the matter is, no, you're not. You're just not. You know, like you're gonna have misprints, you're gonna have failed prints, you're gonna have you know, you're gonna have issues getting it set up. You have to buy the printer, you have to buy the resin, right? And you know, when people say, oh, you know, it cost me like 25 cents for a model, it really doesn't when you can take your time, when you factor your time into there, right?
I think your 7th or 8th printed army is pretty cheap, but those first few certainly are not.
Oh, that's it. Yeah, that's exactly. I mean, I may be wrong, but I don't really know anyone that has a fully 3D printed army, right?
Oh, well, right here.
Well, I mean, you probably do.
Yeah.
Okay, fair enough. You guys
I've
prove
got
me
11
wrong.
of them.
Yeah, fair enough. But how long did it take you to 3D print those models?
Oh, I didn't keep track. I don't know.
Yeah.
I can print a 2,000 point scale army in 2.5 days.
Really?
But I'm not
You're a better man than me.
person.
No, well, he is an expert at plate Tetris. Like, he can get so many models stacked on that plate. Like, I do okay, but he laughs.
Oh yeah, I mean,
I usually get about 14 when I'm really trying, but I've seen him do way more.
Yeah, I did. Well, there you go. Look at that. Wow. What kind of printer? What printer are you using?
These were printed mostly on a Saturn, an Elegoo Saturn.
Yeah.
But some of these are some of my first minis, and they were printed on a first generation Elegoo Mars.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's a small print bed too.
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, I did. I think my record was I did 150 models over a weekend
Ooh.
for the paint and take
That's
for
pretty
Adepticon.
impressive.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I mean, and they were goblins, right? So it didn't take me
Mhm.
long to print them,
Oh,
but
Yeah,
they
sure,
were
sure.
goblins, so it was,
Yeah,
they were like
20 of
3,
them on
4
a
hour
plate.
prints. Oh yeah, easy. I have a Saturn too, so
Okay.
however I could fit. Yeah, I think it was 40 on a plate actually. I think
Wow.
it was 40 on a
Mhm.
plate.
Nice.
And then it was, but yeah, I mean, actually, Altier was at Adepticon. He saw all of my 3D printed goblins.
Mm.
So,
We almost went to Adepticon, and I feel bad because I ended up poo-pooing it, but we should have
oh,
done it.
you should go to Adepticon. Adepticon is fantastic. I can't, it is my favorite event of the year.
Yeah.
Just the
Def-
people there are so phenomenal.
yeah, I definitely want to go, but by the time I get to go to Adepticon, I probably will be stuck behind the booth.
Yeah. Well, OPR doesn't have a booth at Adepticon, does it?
We haven't yet, but we do have a booth in Essen. We're going to
Oh,
be at
really?
Essen Spiel. Yeah.
Oh, right on. Cool.
Mhm.
Well, I mean, maybe you should have a booth at Adepticon.
I think we should, but
Yeah, I mean, it's well, it's your market. I mean,
Mhm.
it is a 40K market, right?
Mhm.
It's not a bad idea. Do you guys don't sell any physical models though? It's just 3D prints.
We do print on demand through
Okay.
Only Games, but
Yeah, that's what we do as well. So
yeah,
it's our main. But I mean, we had Bysterium at Bysterium came with us over to Adepticon.
yeah. You and
Yeah.
Bysterium seem like y'all get along.
I
Your
could see
models
that.
kind of fit together rather
I,
well.
I was a long Bysterium subscriber before
Yeah.
your tribe started, and I
Yeah.
frequently get them both. So
Yeah. Yeah, I've been communicating with Alexi from Mysterium for quite a while. I've been a fan of his work before I even knew it was his work. Actually, I can show you. Maybe nah, that's okay. I can't find it. I don't know where it is right now. But I have a model he sent me, and it was a wonderful gift. But it was an old model he produced through another company, and I just
Oh.
model and I showed it to him one day, and he goes, "Oh, I did that model way back in the day," and I'm like, "I love this model." And
that's cool.
thank me for all of the help I gave him at Adepticon. He sent me that model. Yeah, it's really nice. It's like a dragon demon. It's pretty cool.
Neat.
Yeah.
What are we looking at here? You got speaking of big old models, there's one that you sent us a picture of, which is a woman in a mask with a dagger on fire riding on the top of a gigantic two-headed crow.
So these large models we do are actually our loyalty rewards.
Okay.
So the first one was the Rider of Despair. He's the guy that's on the dragon with the halberd. This is our second one, which is the Rider of Betrayal. And so I haven't included this one in the adventures yet, but the riders are kind of like so the other factions, they have something called an Atriarch, which is a sort of a noble class of the demons, right?
Mhm.
The class of so they're called Yatari, but we call them demons, right? But so like for example, like the Atriarchs of Rune, they're leaders of the children of Rune, right? And any other demon that would fall under them, right? They are the leaders. The faction Discord doesn't actually have any Atriarchs. So, oh, Ryan's here. Look at that.
Hi, Ryan. You're next, buddy.
Oh, fella, you wait. But anyway, so the so yeah, these models are the Discord doesn't have any Atriarchs in their faction. So what they have are these guys called Riders who ride around again Reclamation and further the machinations of their Dark Master.
Reclamation doesn't seem like a fun place to live.
No, it's a different sort of setting. I'm not sure if you're familiar with. I've drawn from a lot of sources for it, but the idea is that it's actually a plane of existence that consumes other realities,
Mhm.
and as they're consumed, they pull in pieces of those realities into Reclamation. It's a place called the Well of Reclamation, which is where the center of the adventures take place. And this comes through in the form of like abandoned buildings and crypts and dungeons and whatever. And they're
Cool.
typically filled with artifacts from other worlds. So the
Love it.
main the main economy revolves around this guild called the Procurement Guild, and they hire adventurers to go into these places and find artifacts and bring them back to town so they can sell them.
And that's
Right.
the welcome package on your tribe, right?
Yeah, the Procurement Guild.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
so
what I
those
thought,
are so those are guys that are going out and exploring these abandoned hidden places and finding these artifacts and bringing them back to towns to be appraised and sold by the Procurement Guild.
yeah, kind of like a default adventuring setting for people when they're making characters.
Yeah, I mean, I drew a lot. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the Dark Tower series by Stephen King.
Oh yes,
So a lot of it's pulled from that. Not pulled from that directly, more of an homage to that.
but yeah, like an inspiration.
Yeah, like I mean, when people are exploring these different places that have been brought through into reclamation, which are the result of a demonic incursion, they're just as likely to find a laser gun as they are to find a longsword, right? Because it destroys all realities and brings and consumes all of the people. Now, occasionally, someone survives a demonic incursion, and they get wrapped up into a cocoon called a call, and they are found in reclamation, very confused and don't know what the hell's going on.
Are we going to get a Cocoon Mini eventually?
Well, it may be one of the character choices when we come out with our campaign setting.
Okay, fun.
As a stranger to the Strange Wastes.
I might know a freelancer who would work on a 5e setting.
Maybe we'll see. We'll talk.
Let's see. I was going to ask something about something else about the campaign setting. You tell me about the goblins. Those are very distinct, and I'm sure they have a place in the lore.
Yeah. So I needed a goblin adventure. I'm a big fan of goblins, and I just felt like we needed to have like a dungeon crawl.
These are very cool goblins.
Oh, there we go. Thanks. So I told Peter we needed goblins. He had some goblins in mind. So we ended up going through and
tell us about your people.
And these guys, I believe the artist was inspired by Yoda.
I can see that a little bit.
Yeah, there's a little bit of Yoda in there. It's but really we wanted them to be like, they're kind of like twisted little puppy dogs in a way. They have like these, like we really wanted them to be nasty little monsters. And this really, like, I think my favorite one is the one with the spear and he has his arm out and he's like just screaming, right? He just has so much personality. But yeah, these goblins were fantastic to do. I was thrilled to and I think the adventure that involves the goblins is one of my favorites. The playtesters for that were just horrified with how many goblins there were in that adventure. It's just wave after wave of goblins, and yeah, it's an interesting encounter.
Well, and it's one of the biggest quantity packs I think y'all put out, right? Like there's a lot of sculpts.
I pushed hard. Because there was originally supposed to only be 10, and I was like, oh, we need more goblins. I just need more goblins. So
how much does you mentioned like the goblins in the adventure, like how much does the needs of the adventure dictate what models are being made, and how much of it is these are the models we made, we need an adventure?
It's about a 50-50 split. Peter and I, we meet once a week, and usually once a quarter we have a good conversation about what he has, like the backlog of models we have, right, and what I can do with them. And then there is a conversation about what I need, right? So, and what would make for a good adventure. And we usually find a happy spot where we work well together. So, like if I need X, Y, and Z, and he's got ABC, either I find a place for it or repurpose it, or we talk to the sculptors and see if they can change it or fix it or do something else, right? Our sculptors work really fast on the fly, which is nice. And that's kind of the advantage of having a full-time staff of sculptors, right? We can go to them and make changes, anytime, rather than working with freelancers, because freelancers, they do the work and then, then you got to go back to them, right? And it's on their schedule, right? So,
and if there's corrections and the whole thing, the process can be really, really time intensive. So
Yeah, and our sculptors are fantastic to work with. I speak so highly of those guys. They're just troopers, and they put out such fantastic work. Like
Mhm.
again, I can't praise them more than I already do.
Do you all ever get the push? Like, this is going to be a no, but do y'all ever get the push to like go back to like the traditional stuff that everybody expects and is going to need? Like, oh, you're going to do goblins, just do normal goblins, just do a normal minotaur. Your zombies don't need armpit mouths.
Yes,
um,
they do.
I mean, so here's what I tell people when I do, because I do hear that quite a bit,
Mhm.
right? Everybody has those, right? And I'll be happy to recommend some sculptors that do fantastic versions of those models, right? I'm an avid 3D printer myself, and I subscribe to a lot of tribes, a lot of Patreons, and I'm more than happy to recommend and even collaborate with a lot of other companies, right? I
Mhm.
do model exchanges. I just did a model exchange with a company called Primal Collectibles, I think
Mhm.
they were called.
Yeah, I've sucked
Yeah,
with it for a while. Yeah.
yeah, and I'm just fan. I was actually looking at their sculpts a long time ago, because I wanted to do because I just wanted to get a few traditional models, and they do a great job. So I was speaking to the owner of that company this month, and I said, hey, I'm like, let's do an exchange. I'll give you 5 models, you give me 5 heroes, and we'll do a model exchange. And like the nice thing, I I I stand by the idea that we don't have any competition in this industry. Only collaborators. We're all fans of games. We're all competing. We're not competing for the same dollars. People, there's enough dollars to go around,
I mean,
right?
good grief, Kristen, you're funding half the industry.
Yeah, exactly.
And I
I
would
mean,
fund more if I
listen,
could.
listen, between you and my friend Robbie, I mean, you guys are pretty much funding the whole thing.
I
I've never
finally
met a
ran
model
into
that guy
somebody
doesn't
who
fund
had
it.
more than me when I was at Gen Con. He had 50. And I was like,
Mhm.
I was only close to that for like 1 or 2 months, but
That's a lot of
it's a
tribes.
lot.
but but yeah, I mean, there's so many people in this industry that are great to work with, and I love working with other people and seeing what we can do together, right? There's no reason for me to make models that other companies are making, right? Those models exist. Do something
I, and I do have to apologize that we had to do a slight blur on these models because of our PG rating. But
You're killing me here.
I'm sorry, but we are all ages.
First my potty mouth, then you take out the
I see.
yeah.
Yeah,
So
because
these are
these don't appear in no monster manual.
no, they don't. We've never shied away from that sort of stuff because we don't really feel it's necessary. Like, um, there's no reason why these creatures would like these are monsters, right?
Hmm.
Why would they care about clothing?
Of
You know,
Right.
course.
you don't see monkeys covering up,
Hmm.
right? When they're out in the woods, right, doing their thing. Why would monsters do that too? So that's our thoughts. You know what I mean? Like that's the natural form of the body, right? That's how it goes.
Well, and it makes grooming with that big tongue a lot easier if they can put their leg all over
Well, that's true,
themselves.
and they're typically covered in blood anyway, right? So I mean, it's not that big of a deal. The No, it's one of those things where I don't necessarily. I'm Canadian. Again, we're Canadian, right? So it's a very different culture up here than it is, I think, down in the States. Like I've had a few encounters of interesting customers.
Hmm.
That are a
But
little concerned with anatomical correctness.
I'll tell you a story. And I don't know this guy's name, so I can't even tell you his name. But I remember this was going back to an event I went to, and I'm not a morning person. I'll be totally honest with you.
Mhm.
Uh, and so I came down to
Avoid
our
the
booth.
booth till later.
Oh,
Got it. Okay.
this was like I think 8. I think it opened up at 8 o'clock. It was this
Wow, that's early.
ungodly hour, right?
Yeah.
And I'm just strolling with my coffee, and this guy, and he's waiting at my booth, and he is red faced, and he is just having a moment. And I said, "How can I help you, man?" And he goes, "Well, I want to talk to you about judgment. And I want to talk to you about,
Oh no.
uh, I want to talk to you about, all this stuff you're putting in here, all this sex stuff." And I said, "I have no idea what you're talking about, son." Uh, and he goes, "Oh, this model over here," and he points at our Siren of Ecstasy, which is
Mhm.
a nude model. And I said, "Well, I'm like, number one, that model isn't even in Judgment. Judgment is sold in retail stores, and we've made the commitment to not to cover up models that not to cover up models that are going to be sold in retail. I'm like, secondly, I'm like, what do you think about this model? And I pulled out one of this model called the Priest of Onslaught. And if you want to do a quick Google search for me, type in Priest of Onslaught. I'm going to show you this model.
Mhm.
There's a really nicely painted version of it.
Can we show this model? Is my question.
Yeah, I think you are
Yeah,
fine
we
showing
can.
this model. Yeah.
Okay.
Which is again going to the point you're probably about to make. Right?
You're about to hear the punchline of this whole story.
The
Once
thing
you
is I'm doing this because YouTube will demonetize me, which is why I had to.
I know.
Blare.
I totally understand. Trust me. We work close with Play on Tabletop, and
Mhm.
they have to put nipple tassels and stuff on our model as well. But anyway, so there's this model, the Priest of Onslaught, and as you can see, he is sawing a dude's head off with the back of his sword. And standing on a beheaded corpse. And I said, but this model's totally cool, right? And he goes, yeah, that model's really cool. I like that model. And I was just like, okay, so let me get this straight, just so we're 100% clear. The boobs are a problem. Heads getting sawed off, totally fine. He goes, well, when you say it like that, you're making me sound crazy. And I just went,
well,
and I think the entire it was not a very big event, so the entire everybody, all the vendors over there started laughing, and the guy stormed out, and I did feel a little guilty. I mean,
well, he's got to fill up that headdress somehow. I mean,
well, that's right. I mean, and that's kind of my point, right? Is that why is it such a taboo to show something that's normal and natural, and yet we have very violent representations on models? It's in our industry, it's pretty silly. So we don't hold back. Like our slogan is gaming for grown-ups, and we do make sure that our fan base, and I think our fan base respects that, and that's what they're looking for when they come to us.
and I think the Bestarium partnership makes a lot of sense.
Well, that's it, right? I mean, Alexi and I, we see, but again, Alexi, he's European, right? Which I think in terms of how we view these kind of things is very similar between Canada and Europe. The States, they have a little different take on it, right? Yeah.
I think we're on the wind down here.
We are, and we are running out of time. So before we bounce away, Taylor, where should people go to check out Creature Caster, and where can they sign up to get these cool digital models?
So, first off, you can go to www.creaturecaster.com. That's our main website, where we have all of our physical models for sale. We don't have STLs for sale yet on our site, mainly because delivery is a little difficult to deliver digitally on a website because we have to host it. If you want to sign up to our tribe, you can go to My Manufactory. We also have a My Manufactory store. You just have to search Creature Caster. You'll find us on the My Manufactory store. Everything we have that we've produced is in that store, as well as full release packages that we have released as well. We also have a Judgment terrain pack that we released recently that's kind of neat. Kind of a surprise seller. We released that to our Kickstarter backers as a thank you for being so patient with us. And as a result, it's actually been, I was surprised. It's been doing gangbusters on My Manufactory.
Well, it's hex-based, right?
Yeah, so Judgment is a hex-based game, so all the terrain is on hexes.
Yeah, there's just not a lot of that, I don't think, out there. So
I'll tell you, hexagons are the bestagons. If you're playing Dungeons and Dragons, my friend, you should try playing it on a hex map versus a grid, and I think you'll be surprised how awesome it is.
Yeah, you're suddenly a lot less. Your dungeons are a lot less square corridors that once you switch over to the hexes.
Yeah, and I mean, the thing is too. I mean, it's just the way there's not, with D&D when you're moving on an angle, you have to do like 1 2 1 2 sort of thing. Right, you're supposed to anyway. With hexes, you don't have to do that. It's all moving. And you'll probably hate to hear this, but when we play Dungeons and Dragons, we play in the metric system. So we treat every hex as 2 meters.
Yeah.
I also play on a 45. So when we play D&D at our role playing games here, D&D or whatever, the hex map I have is actually a transparent hex grid. It's really cool.
Handy.
It's actually really neat. I can send you the link later on. I don't remember who made it, but yeah, it's transparent. It rolls up. It's fantastic. It's made of thick material, but it's 1.5 hexes. So it's really nice. So you can put because all of our models are on 32 millimeter bases. We don't do the 25 millimeter bases because that's not enough base for a model. So what we do is we put them on 32 millimeters and they fit just fine on that. And it's if you treat every hex like 2 meters, 2 meters, works great. Sure. And then so anyway, you can check us out on that. We are also going to be starting a Patreon on the 1st of the month. It's going to just kind of it's going to be delivered through My Mini Factory, but we know that there are people that would prefer to subscribe to our stuff on Patreon versus My Mini Factory, so that's why we're doing it.
Okay.
Anything else to shout out to people?
No, I think we're good. Is there anyone else have any questions in the audience they want to ask?
Any final questions? Get them in now. And while you're getting those questions, if you want to catch any more of our stuff, you can do so over at printyourgames.com. We're also on Facebook at facebook.com/printyourgames, and the site formerly known as Twitter at twitter.com/printyourgames. If you want to catch us on YouTube, it's youtube.com/Param.
You can also find me on TikTok as Seventh Master.
All right. And until next time, I'm Jefferson J. Thacker, also known as Param.
I'm Kristen Sowards, also known as Seventh Master.
And our guest is
Taylor Holloway from Creature Caster.
Thank you.
And don't forget to use your screen protector.